Aaron Davis gives leadership to Aletheia Legacy. He grew up as an artistic kid. His dream was to move to California and to get into the film industry, but he had this underlying feeling that God may be doing something different for him. Aaron and his wife Sarah both graduated from Southern Seminary, started out as a discipleship pastor, but continued to have this feeling that God had something else in store for him. So him and Sarah worked together with a passion for discipling the next generation to live out their faith in the artistic media industry. I keep hearing that of, I did this as a kid, and now God's got me doing it today. It's like God gives us our passions from the beginning. So him and Sarah have been married for 12 years. They have 3 kids, Abel, Ollie, and Eden. Let me welcome Aaron to the stage.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you guys for having me here. This is such an awesome event. This is new for me. This is my first time here, and I'm a Louisville boy, born and raised, and so hearing about business and ministry initiatives and what the other ministries and what the other speakers have already been speaking about is incredibly encouraging. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you guys for welcoming me here. As Ryan just said, I have a wife named Sarah. We have 3 little children. They're all in school right now, getting everyone ready and then heading over here this morning. Always a chaotic morning, but we embrace it. And so I was invited to come here to speak about the arts, and I have a ministry called Aletheia Legacy. Look, it works. That's great. So Aletheia Legacy, Aletheia, if you know your biblical Greek, is the Greek word for truth. And so whenever I was working within the church, I started thinking about a rooted problem, and I wanted to figure out what I could do to solve said rooted problem. And someone encouraged me. They said, write down what you want to do in life. And I said, I want to leave behind a legacy of truth. Okay, so then naturally you go thinking through, well, what do you do to go about that? What are some of the problems that's going on in life? And that's why I think that this is cool, this place, because we're trying to find the spheres of influence. Maybe it's in business, maybe it's in media. For myself, it's the arts, which is a great place to start because we've already accepted that this is a sphere of influence. Because many times when I go into churches and even schools, they will say that that's a secondary issue. They will say that the arts is not really that important. We gotta focus on things that really matter, such as theology and where our kids are going to go next. And hey, I'm a believer, I'm all for that. I want you to know your theology. As stated, I met my wife in Bible college, okay? I am for this. I believe in raising my family with Christian ethics and sound theology. But with that, I also understand that in the very beginning, God created us. He created us with purpose. The very first things that we find out about God is that He was always there. In the beginning, God created. Those are the first 2 things that we find out and learn about God. Before we get into the whole justifying, before we get into morality, before we get into His loving nature, we know that there was always a God and He created. And an amazing piece of that is when He creates good. But I understand that you might be here, you might be thinking, I don't know. There's so many issues going on in the world. What about the unborn? What about politics? What about the financial crisis that's going on with our economy? You might be thinking that those are going to be much more worth your time, so why should we be hearing about the arts? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best to hear from others. I'm going to have different people, whether it's quotes or statistics that's from the world. I am not here to just say, well, this is a potential biblical answer. But I just want us to have a discussion and what we find with the world. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the bulldog himself, Winston Churchill. You might not care about the arts whatsoever, but I got to tell you the story about Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill is known for being one of the leaders in one of the most pivotal moments in the entire world, and that's World War II. If you know, his country ended up fighting in the war, as all of us but had serious problems of Nazi invasion. And so, as a leader of a country, eventually, this is how the story goes. Eventually, the government's talking, we got to make cuts. What are we going to do in life in order to be able to combat against the Nazis? They said, Winston, we need to cut the arts. And he looked back at them and he said, if we cut the arts, what are we fighting the war for? If we cut the arts, what are we fighting the war for? This is Winston Churchill. This is not Van Gogh. Why would he say something like that? It's because he understood that when you see the arts, you see life. You see flourishing. When we see God with creativity, you see life. You see flourishing. You see good. Let's talk real estate, right? Where does the real estate market go? Where's the creatives going? What's a piece of land? Well, if it's a decorated piece of land and if it's an area that's thriving and creative, think about Nulu. I remember growing up in Germantown, right? Like, those shotgun houses? Are you serious? And what they were worth now? A bunch of creatives moved in. Winston Churchill, I think, was right in knowing the fact that if we cut the arts and if we get rid of this and we think that we can live a society where we don't have this, we're actually going to lack influence and we're going to lack flourishing. So I'm here to talk about the influence of the arts. Let's go ahead, I'm going to skip a little bit. Sorry, I got to look at some of my slides here. Oops, there we go. I want to talk about last year's top Billboard 100. I took this as a screenshot on my computer. I can't remember the exact day, but it was when Sabrina Carpenter, if you've heard of her, when she was dominating with her song Espresso, okay? So these are some of the top 5 songs of last year. I'm going to start with Doja Cat. Anybody heard of Doja Cat? This is Doja Cat, Paint the Town Red up there. And basically it was a song where she says, hey, we can live a carefree life, we can do whatever we want, we can paint the town red. And in that, it's a very catchy song, and it's completely saturated with demonic and satanic symbolism. And when I say symbolism, I mean in the album, like, and on the song, she's riding a demon. Like, it's not like maybe there's a triangle here, like it's actually she's riding a demon, and her next single that came out is called Demons, and where she dresses up herself as a demon. And she's one of the most biggest singers going on right now. SZA's Kill Bill, which SZA basically means we're going to glorify Allah. It's some weird nickname on how we can push that. And that's her root. But Kill Bill is basically my ex. He ticked me off, and he now has a new girl, and I want to kill him and her. One of the best songs of last year. Good Luck Babe by Chapel Roan. The LGBTQ anthem, all about a girl who fell in love with a boy, but deep down she knows she's supposed to be with another girl. Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar, if you were here for the Kendrick and Drake beef. Not Like Us is basically, 4 minutes of just hatred towards another man. And the pop anthem of last year, Sabrina Carpenter, I'm pretty sure won the Grammy for Best Single. Espresso, which is basically about life's about having a good time. We keep hearing that theme, right? And I want to be so appealing and so sexually appealing that other people are addicted to me like an espresso, that they're thinking about me all night like they just drank a cup of coffee. This is catchy, right? It's catchy. These are not Christians, obviously. This is the top songs in the Billboard 100. I have traveled the world within our ministry, and let me tell you, some people in other countries, most people in other countries, they don't know many of our people. They don't know necessarily our political leaders, they don't know everything that we believe, but they know these people. They've heard of these people. Even in third world countries, they are familiar with our music. Ron DeSantis, and I want to go ahead and say, there's going to be some political stuff here, and you don't got to read all this. There's going to be some political stuff that I'm talking about. I'm not here to push a political agenda on anything. I'm just going to be talking about certain things that have happened in politics. But last year, Ron DeSantis actually stripped $32 million in his budget for arts and culture because he said it's just too perverted, it's too sexual. Well, if we go back to this, sure, that's an argument, right? Like, okay, I get that. And many in the church would also agree with that as well. The problem is this. The National Library of Medicine, another secular group. Okay, this is not a Christian organization. You probably can't see this, but is this a laser? Yes! Look at that. This is the impact of films. Changes in young people's attitudes after watching a movie. When we consume art, even the National Library of Medicine would say that whatever we are consuming, it actually desensitizes and affects our thoughts about whatever it is that we are consuming. So for example, if you watch a film about HIV, say something like Rent, if you've ever heard of Rent, and you see something like that, you're like, oh, you know what? I understand a little bit more about the AIDS epidemic and problem with HIV, and I'm going to be a little bit more sensitive to that. If I hear a song about, say, Chapel Roan's Good Luck Band, and it's poppy and it's catchy, and I'm like, you know what? What's the difference between a homosexual relationship and a heterosexual relationship? Studies show, this is secular studies will show that this will greatly impact us. So, why do I say all this in the midst of talking about, say, DeSantis cutting the arts? Because there is a misconception that the arts are not making an impact on us. Let's just watch this. It's not going to play. Is it going to play? Do you know anything I got to do?
Click again. Yeah.
Probably. There's something I need to tell you. The princess who came to your ball tonight was me. I'm Gonzarella. Is Fred a she or a he?
I don't know. They're just a friend.
Everything okay, Fred?
Oh, the last time I saw my grandma, I used a different name and pronouns. Now grandma doesn't know I've changed. She still thinks I'm her granddaughter instead of her friend.
These are preschool shows. One was with Disney, you might recognize from the Muppets. Muppet Babies, which is a show that even I let my own kids watch whenever they were of age. I'm like, it's the Muppets, like, come on, I grew up on the Muppets. My parents even grew up on the Muppets. Let me show this to them. And then Netflix with Ridley Jones. Sorry, I'm recovering from a little bit of a cold this past weekend, so I got somewhat of a cough. But if you could not hear, both of these preschool shows, okay, so not teenager, not elementary school even, but preschool, meant for babies, approved on the youngest G level, is saying that Gonzo, for example, did not want to identify himself as a male, but he was actually Cinderella this entire time. And the cow Fred is no longer a he, and he's nervous to expose that to his grandparents, and that he's a they, them. This is going on in children's conversations. Once again, I'm not here to get political, but the stats show that people are not wanting to invest into the arts and culture because they don't believe that it is making an actual transformational impact. They believe in making an investment into politics, finances, other humanitarian type of works. That's actually what's worth a transformational impact. All while you see things such as Fred, Gonzarella, the Billboard 100. So the fact of saying that this is not going to the arts does not make an impact is just completely foolish. But then you could say, for the Christian, you could say, but isn't it a lost cause? Like, do we really even stand a chance of even having this conversation? We're in Kentucky here, really, what's about to happen? Well, last year, if we look at some of the top movies, actually this is 2023 actually, so 2 years ago. Let's look at some of the biggest movies. So big names from Warner Brothers, Disney, Universal, Barbie, Mario, Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy. But then if you look, actually cracking the top 10, Angel Studios had The Sound of Freedom, which is not necessarily just a biblical movie or a Christian movie, but a somewhat faith-based organization that was on human trafficking. You might have seen that. So the thought that we can't make a transformational impact, or that the Christian church, or even maybe a conservative ideology can't really crack into that, well, it's just simply not true because the stats are right here. And look who's underneath them. Taylor Swift herself. Somehow, Angel Studios beat out Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour. That's crazy. But it's funny for us to think that this is not transformational. There's a few more I just want to continue on with my pace. Speaking of Taylor, let's just continue to think through how the arts have impacted society. Taylor Swift brought $1 billion extra in revenue to the NFL. Taylor Swift. She didn't play one down. She might have had screen time of like 10 seconds, if that. Her simply being there, writing her basic songs with a guitar, who affects so many people, has impacted them to bring the NFL an additional $1 billion in revenue. That's insane. You can say, well, she's just a person. No, she's a person who connects to other people because she's a creator. Macklemore, if you were around in 2012 and 2013, Macklemore dominated with Thrift Shop, and then right after that was a big pop catchy song of the year, and then his next single was Same Love, in honor of his producer, who was a homosexual man. It came out Same Love, which basically I can't change even if I try, even if I wanted to. And it's a promotion of homosexuality. And then at the end of the song, they even affirm it through the Bible by using the beloved Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind. And coincidentally, a few months later, the Supreme Court vetoed the Defense Against Marriage Act, and you see the White House turning into a rainbow. Coincidence? I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys. In 2015, Harriet Tubman. Now, you know a lot of the stuff that's gone on over the last several years. We need more diversity. So Harriet Tubman, they've been trying to get Harriet Tubman onto our cash. Right now, it's being discussion that she could be on the $20 bill, replacing Andrew Jackson. But at first, she was going to replace Mr. Alexander Hamilton until a musical came out on Broadway called Hamilton. I don't know if you've heard of it. But when Hamilton came out, everyone's like, well, we can't put Harriet on the $10 bill now. A musical on Broadway. Some of you guys are scoffing and you're thinking, what in the world is wrong with our society? Look, I'm just saying, these are the stats. This is what the world is doing. And then lastly, once again, I'm not here to get political at all, but we know that when President Trump was running for office, there was a big campaign to go against him. And one of the things that's very commonly known is that if you're on a more democratic side, you're probably associated with the arts and culture. And so in a campaign to go against Trump, you're going to notice all of these actors. They're going to call themselves famous people. They're all actors. There's no politicians. There's not even singers. They're all actors in this next video.
On Tuesday, November 8th, this country will make one of the most important decisions in its history. You have a chance.
You have an obligation
to be a part of that decision.
You might think it's not important, you might think you're not important,
but that's not true. And the only way we can prove that to you is by having lots of famous people.
Lots and lots of famous people.
Just a ton of famous people.
Repeating how important.
How important it is.
but you only get this many famous people together if the issue is one that truly matters to all of us.
A disease or
Ecological crisis or
A racist, abusive coward who could permanently damage the fabric of our society.
Do the math. Do we really want to give nuclear weapons to a man whose signature move is firing things?
But we can end this nightmare before it begins.
We can save the day.
So the point of that, why I want to show that to you, once again, not trying to be political here, but they call themselves famous, but they're all actors. It's the creatives got together and said, we're going to put an ad on TV, and it did impact. Obviously, it didn't impact the election enough. Trump ended up winning. But the question I just got to ask, though, they were after a vote. So I'm curious, what is bigger, the vote or the influence? You know, many people were thinking this previous election was going to be decided by Taylor Swift. That's what people were talking about. I keep talking about these like famous people, and you might not care about them at all. And quite frankly, I really don't care about them either. But it's really important to know why. Why do people care about them? Why are people so impacted by them? Well, I'm not the brightest guy in the room, so I'm going to bring up someone who is much smarter than me, and maybe you've heard of his name before, but Francis Schaeffer, apologist, he says, he who loses the arts loses the culture. This is an evangelical who is known for giving great wisdom, great philosophy, great apologetics in defending the faith. And he himself would say, he who loses the arts loses the culture. Why is this important? Why does the church should have anything to do with the arts? Because, brothers and sisters, we are after the culture. We are trying to impact the culture. We are trying to love the culture just like Christ loved it. That means we must be in it and we must be leading it. There was once upon a time where the Christians were the leaders in the arts. And it was basically like a big bazooka. And we said, I don't want to mess with this anymore. Here, why don't you guys deal with this? And now we're like, oh man, Hollywood's like evil. They're pointing the gun at us. Well, yeah, you lost your influence. The church has lost its influence. I love this quote by Schaeffer. It's what encourages me as I'm talking to people and they're like, yeah, but I got more pressing issues. Not just after painting pictures and dressing up. Even though that's fine, that's okay. We're after the culture here. All the way back to Genesis. In Genesis, God created everything. This is amazing. Another little apologetic tool to have. Why are we always blown away by the Grand Canyon or the starry night in the sky or the first time you see the ocean? It's like, whoa. Could it be because when God created it, it was objectively defined as good? When he creates, it is good. When I create, it's subjective. You might like it, you might not. But when God creates something, it is objectively good. It is objectively beautiful. And his crown creation, mankind himself, he said, you're going to go take care of my creation. You're going to keep it, and you're going to tend it. So man has dominion over the creation. Let's go into that a little bit. Tending and keeping. God gave man dominion to tend his creations in Genesis 1. Tending, which is the Hebrew word of abad, meaning cultivate and serve God's creation. Basically, God already had it. He already created it. It's all good. But he gave man a privilege, a liberty of partaking in that good creation. I want you to water the plants. I want you to feed the animals. I want you to take care of it. Collaborating with what I've already given you and making even more beauty. Flourishing it, multiplying it, seeing the true transformation that it can have and the fruitfulness that it can bear in its beauty. But he also tells Adam not just to cultivate it, but to keep it, shamar, which means to guard and to protect it. Mankind is called to protect creation. Now, if you're an environmentalist, this is like, this is great. You're like, yes, let's save the trees. I'm fine with that. But let's just talk about creation. How much of our art has been tainted? How much of our art has not been protected? Because the church did not protect it. We were focused on good issues, but we might not have been focused on the root issues of how this began to go about. Yes, we're focusing on education, we're focusing on our theology in our churches, but all while are we addressing this underlying issue of worldview? Most likely, if you had a teenager or someone in your family who is young and they went to church, they're probably going to forget what they heard about on Sunday. I bet they won't forget the song that they heard that week, though. They won't forget the movie that they watched that week. It's going to make a much bigger impact on them, which is amazing, right? Because we're like, okay, that's just like man-made studies, right? Actually not. Jesus did this himself. You know, Jesus' disciples actually called him out when he kept teaching in parables. He kept teaching in stories, and he would tell these stories, the rich young ruler, the man and the treasure. And his disciples are like, Jesus, just tell them what to do. Just tell them what to think. Give them the answers. And Jesus is like, I always like make up extra narratives, so don't judge me. But I'm thinking, he's like, you fools! There's something so much greater than just telling somebody what to do. We know this in education. Memorization is the weakest form of actually adopting a new thought, of incepting a thought. We have to use both sides of our brain, the literal side of our brain and the creative side of our brain, collaborating and having a conversation. That's when information actually sticks. Jesus knew this himself. So he's taught in parables, he taught in stories so that the common man, thousands of people, would understand and have the heavenly truths put onto their hearts. His own disciples called him out and said, come on, give us the good stuff. And he's like, this is what they need. And at the right time, at the right place, they're going to be chewing on this, and it's going to last a lot longer, and they're going to understand it. This is the keeping and tending. So what am I here for? I want to convince you that Christians are to create beauty and to protect it. Preserve it, serve it, in a way in which it can last and let it flourish as much value and inspiration as possible. Beauty is ours. Creation is ours. Creativity is ours. I love this quote. Actually, I'll get there in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. But even today, we're longing for this reunion. We're longing for beauty. We're longing for perfection. Most theologians would say it's because we're longing for being reunited with our God in the creative order. In the beginning, when all the creation was there and Adam was taking care of everything, he actually walked with God. What did they do? They enjoyed life. They enjoyed his creation. They delighted. Adam delighted in God, and Adam delighted in his creation. That's a good thing. So oftentimes, we talk about delighting in God, but we don't want to delight in the good gifts that he has given us. I think it's because of this Russ Ramsey quote, which I absolutely love. I encourage if you want to hear more about books or understanding art and theology, Russ Ramsey's collection is fantastic. But we are drawn to beauty, and we instinctively know that somewhere, somehow, such a thing as perfection exists. When we see beauty, it gives us something a little bit more. That's why I whisper when I go to the Grand Canyon. It's because I'm in the presence of beauty here. That's why when the first time I see the ocean, I'm just like, wow, this is the most the eye can see. I'm blown away. It's because I'm getting a glimpse of heaven. I'm getting a glimpse of God. Why? I like to tell students that I work with that we're like the moon. God is the sun, and he gives off life. He gives energy. He is the source. The moon has no power. If you turn off the sun, the moon does nothing. The moon is just a floating rock. There's nothing illuminating coming out of it. But the moon is reflecting what the sun gives off. Brothers and sisters, we are called to be like the moon to God. We are to reflect his goodness, reflect his glory, reflect beauty that can be found in so many things. I mean, think about this. If we only lived our lives, we didn't understand beauty, we didn't understand creativity. Think about your relationships with your spouse or your kid, and you're like, oh, I love you. There's no romanticism there. I say I love my wife, but I never take her out on dates. I never surprise her. I never get romantic with her. What's that relationship? What's just a statement? Well, it's the same thing, that God wants us to have this relationship. He wants us to delight in him. He wants us to delight in his glory, and not just that, take in his glory, but also reflect it amongst the world. Ephesians 2:10 says, so, I'm going to go back there. Ephesians 2:10 says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. When we think of Adam at the garden, he is tending, he is keeping. But then there's this problem. He can have everything. He can delight in what God has given him. But when he wants to consume more than what he has offered and what is not necessarily of God, we have the fall of man. When Eve partakes and Adam partakes in the consumption of eating of the fruit, they are now consuming information that is going to hurt and damage them. Man, we live in a society that loves to consume. We don't necessarily always associate the arts with this whole debate about creating versus consuming. But everyone knows what TikTok is in this room. Maybe you're not on it, but you've heard it. We know what reels are. We just scroll, and we constantly are consuming more than we've ever consumed in our lives. Devices, technology, robots know what we want, and they feed it to us like we are a machine. We're like this close to being the guys in WALL-E, if you know what I mean. If you've ever seen the movie WALL-E. There is a world where when we're only consuming, it actually takes us away from the Creator. Because when we create, we're actually reflecting God's glory back at him. And so this is an argument that I like to say, is that we are called to create over consume. In a world where the church is always fighting against sin, politics are fighting against, different ideologies that might take away from their worldviews or their beliefs, a lot of the times even the consumption of maybe even good things takes us away from our Creator and takes us away from doing the good things that God has called us to do. God did not call Adam to just consume in the garden. He didn't say, have at it, boy. Have fun. No, he said, take care of it. Tend it. Keep it. Create more. Flourish it. Make life. See, in a problem where we are only consuming, we become glutton. And we become overweight and saturated with ideas and problems. Well, what are we actually doing? Well, what I want us to do is I want us to create. It's funny that the leaders in the world, some of the biggest billionaires in the world, yeah, they're engineers, yeah, they're in technology, but they're creatives. They thought through a problem and they had a creative solution for it. Steve Jobs himself, if you have an iPhone, not necessarily an engineer. He would label himself as an artist. He viewed himself as an artist, and he created the personal computer and the iPhone and so many other things, invested into Pixar. He viewed himself as a creative. Elon Musk saw a problem, created a solution for it. This is why the church should be pushing out and encouraging creativity, finding problems, and creating solutions. But when we're only just giving the answers and saying this is how you ought to live, this is how you ought to do, but we're not encouraging and we're not training them how to create, it becomes a huge problem. And so this is why, through our ministry, we like to say the solution is creative discipleship. There are creatives that are out there. There are people that are out there who are trying to make an impact. One of the biggest problems that we see, though, in the world is that because of this such huge disconnect between the church and the arts, there's a lack of discipleship. How many artists do you find who they've fallen away because, well, they were out on tour and they never went to church? They maybe had a foundation in the church, but they're not being discipled. They're not being held accountable. And yet, once again, we would rather listen to the artist than we would rather even listen to the pastor. It is imperative. We can make an argument and say, well, people should just do this. That's fine. We can continue to say that, but they're not going to. They're going to continue to listen and follow after the creatives. That doesn't mean that this is belonging to a secular world. We think of people like Michelangelo, who were the leaders, the first rock star artists that ever really came about. Michelangelo getting paid good money to create beauty. He was paid to do the Sistine Chapel because he's a problem solver, not just because he's a good artist. Creativity is not just about painting pictures and dressing up, as I said. What are the problems in the world, and how can we creatively come up with a solution? We like to say, for creative discipleship, it's spreading the arts by discipling creatives to create beauty, engage culture, and inspire the world. This world belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to Him. Just like in the Renaissance, people would use their arts and people would use their creativity to reflect it back to God. Once upon a time, we would build churches and cathedrals so big and so high and so magnificent so that we would look up to the heavens. It's funny that we've gotten away from that amongst the fog machines and the LED lights. I walked into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and some people think that it was a garden tomb where Jesus resurrected. Some people have a problem with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre because of the Catholic roots and tradition or whatnot. And I was asked, like, what do you think about the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? I was like, so hear me out. I get it. There's a problem with maybe a high church mentality, and that maybe there's a worship of relics and the things. But when I walked into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I was blown away by what I saw. And then I saw women come next to me, walk next to me, fall on their face, saying, I'm stepping into the presence of God. And I looked at them, and I thought, why am I not doing that? Why am I not doing that? Whether this is the exact place or not, there's a reverence. There's a holiness of me encountering God. There is a encounter with Moses amongst the burning bush of take off your shoes. You are on hallowed ground. The church has gotten away from that. We should create beauty, engage culture, and inspire the world. I want to go back to my boy, Winston Churchill. He says, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Why do I say that? Ryan told a little bit of my story. I wanted to go into acting at a young age. I was a football player. I had a real life High School Musical story. Like, I was ashamed to be in the arts because I was playing football and I didn't want to be judged and critiqued. And so I would wait till everybody else was done auditioning, and then I would sneak in, and if I got a good part, I would keep the part. And but I always grew up as an artistic kid, and I really didn't have the confidence to continue that and to be bold about it until much later in life. And when I wanted to move out to LA, the Lord was speaking to me heavily, like big time. And I knew that I was not properly discipled. And I had a fear, not of failure, but I had a fear of a lack of discipleship. And I had a fear that because the church didn't know what to do with me, the church didn't know how to talk to me about my dreams, my aspirations, I just thought I can't pursue these types of things. And I've heard other stories of other people here as well, where the church didn't properly equip them. So instead, I went and I became a big boy and I got a degree in theology. But somehow, as Ryan said, the Lord got a hold of me and brought me back to my root, brought me back to my love. I began teaching in pastoral ministry. I would write letters of recommendation for students who had the same dreams as me that, hey, I'm so gifted and talented, I can go and impact the world. And I would write letters of recommendations, I would hand them off to the world, and guess what? They would tear them down because the people who were pouring into them and equipping them is not the church. And the church and Christians severely lacked in creative discipleship. And it got at me so much that the same individual, the same teenager that I was, that I knew I wasn't going to be discipled, but now I'm handing over disciples to the world. We can't do that anymore. We can't do that anymore. There is a systemic problem within the church that must be changed. We must understand and we must make an impact amongst our creatives, whether it's local, national, whatever. But we're not alone. And this is why I bring up Winston Churchill, because yeah, I was for the arts, for one. But if we're going to battle, right now we might think that this is futile. This is momentary. What once belonged to the church that now was given up by the church could also be led by the church once again. We are in a war just like we were back then. Your kids, our teenagers, our creatives are being captivated by Hollywood, New York, the creative arts. But we're not alone. There are many ministries and many organizations who are trying to fight back. We're like one little one over here with Aletheia Legacy. And then, hi Jen, there's Jen over there with Elevate Dance Ministry, all local stuff here. But there's people like the Kindred Brothers who are trying to now invest. If you've seen the movies like The Forge or Fireproof, they are now discipling young creatives. Just in Corydon, Indiana, there's Tyler Sampson with Purpose Fest, a film festival that's now bringing people from all over, just about 30, 45 minutes away. Inkwell with Christianity Today is trying to work with creatives and specifically on the side of poetry. Transcend, otherworldly, an organization that's wanting to work with more of an urban community and with hip hop. South End Youth Theater here in Louisville that we planted for a Christian community-based theater, Christian Worldview Film Festival. If you need to start learning and training about how to be a filmmaker, there are organizations that are out there. Most likely you have not heard of them. That's why it's time for the church to come together. The church has to come together. We have to have these resources available. That might not be you. You might not be the creative one. I fully understand that. But what happens when you encounter someone who they don't know what their next step is? My hope is that you will tap in, you will get in touch with us, and that we can connect you and we can help equip you. Because you might not have all the answers. Whoever has all the answers? We don't. But it's out there. And my goal for this time is that we can use our influence and we can understand how the creative arts is such an essential piece in cultivating our world. I think that's about it. Thank you guys so much.